Welcome to the final review for algebra, and we're going to be doing these videos in standards, or even maybe breaking some of the standards into a couple of different ones. This is for standard 1, and there were 3 basic topics that we wanted to cover in this. One of them was to evaluate or solve an equation or expression. The other was to translate from words into algebraic expressions, and the third was to factor. Okay, so when we get started, I'm just going to do 2 of the problems. When we talk about evaluating or solving, it means we're either plugging in a value or we're solving for a variable or a value. Problem number 1 had a couple of problems that we did that I wanted to just briefly show you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. For C equals D times 3.14, find C when D equals 100. So all they're really telling you is that D has a value of 100. And since it has a value of 100, we are going to plug 100 in for D and just see what we get for C. So C equals 100 times 3.14, which is going to be C equals 314. Okay? And that's all they really asked us to do on that one. On one of the other ones, they gave us a value and then asked us to solve for another value. So, on this one, they gave us the fact that 2x plus 3y equals 12, and they said find y when x equals 0. So when we get down to the bottom, our solution will be y equals something. So let's plug in the numbers. Let's see, they told us that x is 0. So we're going to plug that in here. 2 times 0 plus 3y equals 12. I know that 2 times 0 is just going to be 0 plus 3y equals 12. So this is just 3y equals 12. Divide both sides by 3, just in the way that we solve equations, and we'll get y equals 12 divided by 3, which is 4. Okay, don't want to make this too long. I wanted to review something before we start talking about changing or translating from words into algebraic expression. Over here on this side, look at these 4 problems that I've put on here. 3 plus 4 equals 7, 4 plus 3 equals 7, 3 minus 4 equals -1, and 4 minus 3 equals +1. Now, the reason I show you this is a lot of times when you're changing words and it says that you're adding or more than, the order will usually not matter, because you can switch the order of things when you add them and still get the same answer. But if you subtract something, the order is important. 3 subtract 4 gives you -1, and 4 subtract 3 gives you a +1. Different answers. So be careful when it says that you're subtracting or less than or some words like that. Make sure you know what you're subtracting from, and we'll talk about that on some of the problems as they come up. Okay, here's some vocabulary to remember as part of this section. Remember that the word product means to multiply, sum means to add, and difference means to subtract. Okay, first one said 5 more than 6 times x. A shortcut for writing 6 times x is just to write it as 6x. 5 more usually implies that I'm adding 5 to something. What am I adding the 5 to? 5 more than 6 times x. So I'm going to basically take the 6x and get 5 more, add 5 to it. If you wrote this as 5 plus 6x, that would also be right. Okay. The next one, any focusing moment now. 6 less than 5 times x. Okay, 6 less is usually mean I'm going to take 6 away from something. Then 5 times x. We said we could write 5 times x as just 5x. Now, am I doing 5x? Here's the question I want you to think about. So here's the question. am I doing 6 and I'm taking 5x from it, or am I doing 5x's and taking 6 from it? Well, it tells us here 6 less than 5 times x. So I'm starting with 5 times x, and then I'm getting 6 less than that. So it's going to be this one here. Okay. Once again, an alternate way to write that, if you're very careful, is negative 6 plus 5x. But that doesn't follow the intuition there as well as saying 5x minus 6. Okay, 5 less than 6 times x. Okay, 6x, so that's what 6 times x is. 5 less is minus 5. Okay, what am I subtracting? Am I subtracting 6x from 5, or am I subtracting 5 from 6x? So it's 5 less than that. So it's going to be 6x minus 5. Okay. Okay, next one. 5 times the sum of x and negative 6. Okay, 5 times, so I know I'm going to take 5 times something. And what am I going to take 5 times? The sum of x and negative 6. Now, we said earlier that sum means to add, and it says of these two things. So I'm going to add x and negative 6. When I write this out, because I'm doing this sum first, because I'm going to find the sum, then multiply it times 5. I'm going to write it as 5 times x plus negative 6. Now, that's literally writing it the way that it's written there. This is a more common way to write it. 5, put it just on the outside of the parentheses for time, x, and when you add a negative, it is the same as subtracting. So 5 times x minus 6 will give you the same answer. Okay, now in factoring, which was the third topic for this, we need to remember that we need to factor out a greatest common factor, set up the diamond in the rectangle by putting the x term here, x squared term here, constant term, and then we're going to take and multiply these two to put up here in the top of our diamond. Now, we're going to follow the steps to factoring. There's another video that shows how to do that in detail. Since this is only a review, I'm just going to do it basically as we go. Remember, I make my diamonds by just making an X, and then here is my generic rectangle for factoring out. First step, factor out a greatest common factor if one exists. Is there a number that will go into 4 or divide 4, 12, and 8? Most students in class will say 2, but there's a larger number. The larger number that will go into all of them is the number 4. So if I take and I factor out or divide out 4, I will get 4. That'll divide out to x squared. 12 divided by 4 will be 3x. And 8 divided by 4 will be 2. I'm going to go ahead and put this factor out here as part of my answer because I don't want to lose it. But this makes it easier because now I'm going to factor this easier expression. Okay, x squared term goes here. Constant x term, multiply these two to get the top of that. Let's see, that's 2x squared. What two numbers multiply to 2x squared and add to 3x? It'd be 2x times 1x. Put them over here. And now I'm going to factor. The biggest thing on this row that will factor out is x. Now I'm going to multiply. X times x is x squared. X times 1. Now I'm going to factor up this column. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. And if I did it right, these two will multiply to this. And they do. So my two factors are going to be x plus 2 and x plus 1. I'll put those up here to finish off my answer. And that is it. So that's a basic overview of Standard 1.